Okay, so thank you very much for taking the time out to sit down and speak with me. So I suppose the first question is why are we here? What is the project you are working on, to anyone?
Well, the show is called The Aviatrix, and it's a new musical about Harriet Quimby. She was the first American woman to get her pilot's license. And
along a huge list of other firsts. I mean, first woman to fly across the English Channel, first woman to own and drive a car in the United States, first female
she was a
journalist to take her own pictures.
Yeah.
She was the first woman credited for writing screenplays. I mean, the list goes on and on.
It's so strange because obviously those are big accomplishments, and I know I've not personally heard of her before. So obviously bringing awareness is fantastic. But we'll talk about that in a bit later. So what was all your involvements within the show?
Well, my name's Lily. I was the librettist.
I was the composer.
His name's Casey.
And I'm Ellie, and I directed it.
And we all produced it in some facet, each of us, including our associate producer, Becky, who's not here.
So why this story? What piqued interest about telling this story through a musical?
Oh gosh. Well, Ellie, do you want to say something?
I can.
Yeah, you want to go for it?
Yeah, no, I can.
We all have our own reasons, I'm sure.
We do. Yeah. Lily has this amazing story, which I think for another date, of like how they came to the had the literal spark, where they saw Harriet's flying costume, that purple situation in a museum. But for me, why this story was so important is, as I was reading it, number one, I also didn't know who she was, and had the same reaction of you, as why don't I know? So immediately I was so excited to make a musical about someone that I literally knew nothing about. And also, you would Google her and there's 5 things that pop up, So it was really exciting to me that we actually had a chance to tell her story accurately and with a lot of heart, because that's something that I think the 3, Casey, Lily, and I, kind of gravitated towards. Just as collaborators, the 3 of us really kind of work from our hearts rather than our minds, or from a business standpoint. Yeah. It's we are very heart driven. But anyway, the reason I was so excited to get my hands on this story is that it feels like Harriet is doing all these things in 2021, but you look at the dates and she was doing it in 1911. And yeah, that's, and it's somewhat, when you're watching the musical, because we don't have the full Broadway budget, it's also not on stage. The costumes give a hint of it, but we're pre-World War I. So the fact that she was able to do all of these things and become a trailblazer for women in journalism as well as women in aviation, I just couldn't take my hands off of it. So the thing that resonates with me most, I would say, about her is that she didn't have to choose. And the story is a lot about her. Well, I mean, I think it does a really good job of bringing both sides of someone who wanted to do everything and actually didn't choose, right? And you see, it goes pretty well for her until a certain point. And then you see what happens when you kind of push past a boundary and keep trying for the dream, the perfect world, the utopia, that she was dreaming of. But again, I say it, and then you think about the show and you think about the last number, where we actually get that extra special little bit of time with her, to kind of watch her realize, I lost it. I pushed it too far. Mm-hmm. And then you see her realize, but it's okay. I can actually pass on peacefully. I did it. I did what I set out to do. So as someone who is a highly driven, crazy person, I now call her my friend, because I see a lot of myself in her. So so that's I just feel like a lot, like this is the time in 2021, so many people are doing so many different things. We are slowly turning away from the idea of pigeonholing people. And I think it's going to resonate with others who are not just one thing, and they're going to watch Harriet and be like, I can do it too, you know? So that's why, for me, that's why this story right now, and that's the reason for me.
You touched on it a little bit, but how would you explain the story to someone who's never seen the show before? Just like a general outline of what happens.
Totally. Lily, do you want to go for it?
Sure. So the theme of the show, I would say, is what would you sacrifice for your dreams? And we follow Harriet. It starts at when she's in her early 20s and leaving her mother in order to make a career as a journalist in New York. And she goes, but she always sort of has her mother's voice in her head with her as she goes. I don't know if that's an important detail in this synopsis. And she starts making her way. She gets a job at Leslie's Illustrated newspaper, which was one of the first newspapers in the country to include images. And it has these really beautiful like pieces of art in it that you can see if you do some Googling. And one day they assign her to cover for the newspaper viewing an air show. And she is so taken with the idea that she immediately decides, like, this is what she has to do. It's also there that she meets Mathilde Moissant, who will become the second woman in the United States to get her pilot's license. And they are like quick, instant friends at that moment. I don't know how detailed you want me to get with this. But we follow them as they have to cross barriers to get into flight school with Mathilde's brother John Moissant, who was already a well-known pilot. There's a barrier in the finances in that flight school is extremely expensive, and Harriet doesn't have any money, so she has to get help from Leslie's Illustrated in order to enter flight school. Help me here. Am I missing things?
Well, I was going to go much more generally and say it is, and forgive any puns that come up, but it is about the rise and fall of America's first female pilot and what that does to her relationships with the people she loves in her life.
Well, that is much more general. I was really going to beat for beat.
You asked me what the show's about. That's why I say the show's about.
I could keep going, but I was sensing I'm not sure that that's what you were going for.
Well, no, either's fine. It's just obviously people, when they are on your social media, which we'll talk about later, but they'll see a show and they won't know what it's about. So what, like you briefly talked about there, but the idea of the show is overcoming boundaries and achieving your dream, essentially, and then how far you're willing to go to do something like that. So obviously putting on a new musical is stressful at the best of times. But doing it right now is, an even bigger task. So how was the process of creating the new show on top of everything that's going on?
Well,
special.
It was insanity. But so back in August is when we called Ellie, because we were supposed to have a reading of our draft of the show in April.
In person, with people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in March, we had our very first meeting to talk about that reading. And it was that day that Broadway shut down. And we were like, oh, okay.
Guess we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. April may not happen, but maybe we could push it to June. And then
we were like, for sure, June.
Yeah. And then June rolled around and we're like, maybe we ought to just postpone this indefinitely. And we were kind of bummed, And then all this Zoom theater was happening, like with people in boxes. And Casey turns to me and he's like, well, could we do that for this? And I was like, well, no, there are 22 songs. The Zoom cannot handle music. And he's like, oh, that's right. Well, okay, but what if we, and then
Yeah.
it just like kept brainstorming.
As I mentioned, I work at NYU, and Ellie works there with me. And Ellie has been the projects coordinator there for a year now.
Almost a year, about a half,
almost
2/3 of a year.
So when everything stopped, all the shows at NYU stopped except for one, and it's the one that Ellie was assisting the director on. And in fact, it was a physical acting project. That was the point of it. It was all supposed to be about physical acting. And so they managed to do a virtual production. I think it was really one of the first in the world. And that got my gears going. And I was just kind of like, all right, if they can do it and they had songs, so can we. But,
so
a lot more than a reading.
So we called Ellie and we're like, would it be crazy if? And she said, well, yes. And then she said, let's talk about it more. And from then we had a meeting at least once a week, like sometimes more than once a week.
Sometimes once a day.
Yeah, talk about everything. And we really dug into the script. So the draft now is I'd say 80% different than it was that was going to be for that reading in April. It's just like entirely. You're going to say about the cut songs?
Oh, well, no. I mean, that point is we could put together a whole other musical with the songs that we cut within 2 months' time. What I was going to say though is when you think about what's the difference between this process and a normal process, and we're talking about even just the beginning phases of planning to do this, the communication about what we want and how we want it was paramount. And we had to be so detailed and specific. And some of those things we had to learn along the way, like how specific do we need to be about this one thing that we want, this one prop, this one costume piece, this shot? Because when you're doing it in the theater, it's just like, oh, can you cheat stage right?
Yeah.
But when you're doing this on screen, all those things really have to be nailed down beforehand. So we were feverishly writing the newest draft of the script from August up through the beginning of October. And then we did a table read. And then Ellie was like, all right, you have like a week. And then we got to lock this thing down. So
yeah, kind of the three of us love script changes. So I kind of at one point was just like, okay, we need to stop now.
Our stage manager and the music supervisor were just like, please beg
stop
you,
writing more.
Stop changing things.
And there was a moment where our music supervisor, Matt, was on the phone with me and he was pleading, like, please stop changing things. And we're like, we promise. And like 10 minutes later, Lily's like,
I'm really sorry, I have a new lyric for you.
I have a new song.
To add on to what these two are saying, just to give you an idea of how it went from these ideas to like what you just saw. So what that entailed was I, like Casey said, did this virtual show. We premiered it in May of last year. And that was like I literally don't know of any other show that there were a couple other shows that went up, but they weren't what we had done. A lot of people were like recording Zoom and then like editing that and then putting that together. And what we did was a baby version of this show, which was they used their phone cameras and we edited it all together with green screens and all this stuff. So amazingly, that process in May was actually like 85% like the same as the process that we did for this. So I'm like still kind of flabbergasted that our like grand experiment in May actually stuck. Do you know what I mean? But the way that this whole thing was kind of put together was Caroline, our stage manager, and me created a rehearsal schedule, and then cast the show. We had 7 wonderful actors, and essentially rehearsed and filmed from October to November. So we rehearsed it kind of in October, like late October, rehearsed and filmed through November. And then in December, I went through, and so we filmed with like essentially kind of like filming like a film. So like each actor, we broke the script up, and I wish I could show you the amazing spreadsheet that Caroline created to keep track of all of this.
It's
But we
nuts.
broke up this, 2-hour musical into, there are 16 scenes. We broke each scene up into anywhere from 3 to 20 parts and filmed each thing separately. And I don't know if you noticed, but each of the actors had a little lavalier microphone. So we filmed the songs separately than the scenes because it required a different microphone. Got all somehow, honestly, I don't know. I can't believe that. Still can't believe this happened. We somehow got the actors to upload nearly every single take that they took. And so then during the month of December, I went through and in preparation for our video editors to get started, I went through and watched, I would say 90% of every single take and chose the takes that I wanted at what times. Yeah, that face, that's what it was. And chose every single take so that, the editors didn't have to go through that. I think I must have watched upwards of 300, 400 videos. And communicated that to them. And then essentially, this is the part that makes my brain explode. The editors took all the videos from the internet, that's where they were, downloaded everything onto a hard drive, keyed out every single green screen because I don't know, like I didn't know this, like I honestly didn't know, but like if you were filming me right now without a green screen, this is the background you get. But when you film a green screen, it's not just like, and by green screen, dude, it's like effect on layer on thing. So that whole thing was a process. And then from there, they moved everybody in the right places. I also, in the rehearsal process, created a storyboard for the show because you're probably going to ask this later, but I'll just say it now. What's different about this process for me as a director is that I'm half theater director, half film director. So everything that you saw on screen was written down as a storyboard idea. And then from there taken and implemented into the actual video clips. So they took the storyboard that I wrote, moved everything into the right place. And then from there, we worked on notes to make sure the backgrounds were in the right place. There were fade ins, fade outs, blurred edges, all of this stuff.
And round the clock too. Round the clock. Round the clock.
Oh yeah, I would say like this entire month of January, I have been in constant communication with the editors. And so from there, that's essentially what you saw. So just to give you, because I feel like it's actually kind of interesting for theater people to actually hear like, this is what the process was like. And if you had to tell me to encapsulate all of what I just said in one thing, I would say pre-production, planning, more pre-production, more planning.
And then a lot of post.
Well, honestly,
and then a shit ton of post.
Yeah. Communication is really the most important thing. And it's so hard when no one's in the same room as each other, but everyone, has this shared goal of let's make this thing that, doesn't really exist to the level that we want to do it. And here's our idea of how to do it, and then hope that the other person understands what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
It
was really building the plane while we were flying it.
Which, apt metaphor.
And one thing we should not gloss over that was sort of encapsulated in what Ellie was saying, but I think if I highlight it, will really show you also the added stress to what Ellie was just talking about, and just the scope was we recorded the songs separately in their own in their own like basically rehearsal / performance like timing. So like we got together the second week of October, did our table read, and then it was teaching the actors the music. And over Zoom, that's a very interesting thing to do. Basically, Matt and myself made ourselves available during like office hour times on Zoom to coach the actors through the songs. And
otherwise
then
they taught themselves.
Yeah,
like they came if they had questions.
We kind of had to pick people we knew were really strong musicians, so that they can look at it and go, oh, okay, I understand what's going on. So, and then we spent like
3 weeks.
I think in total it was about a month front to back recording all the music. There were some pickup things that we had to do that were separated from the bulk of it that made it a month, but like a solid 3 weeks of just constant audio recording. And then from there,
well, it was cool how you did it too.
Oh yeah.
So they would be in their apartment singing into their mic. And
we made sure they all had some sort of like condenser microphone, as opposed to like singing into an iPhone or into some garbage little $12 microphone.
Yeah, and we used this this really cool software
called Listen To.
Yeah, called Listen To, where they would sing. It would get processed by their like GarageBand or Logic, whatever they had, then travel over the internet into Casey and Matt's computers, where they would receive it in their Logic, and so that was all in real time, so that Casey and Matt could then direct them between takes, be like, oh, just try that again, but like a little softer, or try it with like this.
Yeah, and then this way they were able to hear the music in real time. Like there was a little bit of latency, but the latency wasn't so much of an issue for them, because when they got it, they would start singing and they'd sing with what they could hear.
Yeah.
It would come back to us about twice as late, because it would go there and then come back. But then we just kind of adapted to that, and later in editing, we just shifted everything to be in time. And this also allowed us to take multiple takes over multiple takes.
Yeah.
Which was like a big thing I was a stickler on. I was like, if we can't do that, this is going to be a nightmare to edit.
Well, yeah, because otherwise the actors would just have to do a few takes on their own and send it over. And there would just be a huge time delay between when you could, give them notes and try again. It would have just taken 3 times as long.
So that was a whole almost month-long process that you add that then to the filming. And so we did what we call rough puffs of the. That's
I coined that.
Lily coined the phrase rough puff in terms of like drafts of things. It's a pastry term.
It was the from the Bake Show. Or Bake Off.
So we would do these rough puffs of the alignment, so that like we would take everything that we recorded, line it up so that we have like decent takes that we like, at least decent enough that the actors can hear it and know what they have to lip sync to, and in time. Then we sent that out to all of our team, and then Caroline or Becky and sometimes Ellie would play it through the computer so that they could film the songs with proper timing. So that was a huge part of the process, and then the acting and all of that. And I don't know if you saw, but like, or caught some moments, but like they were actually playing off of each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Ellie managed that, but like magical Ellie here.
I suppose my final question is, where can everyone stay up to date with the show? Where can they catch it? How can they follow you guys on social media?
Yes, so we have a Facebook, an Instagram, and a Twitter now.
And a TikTok.
Oh, and a TikTok. We do.
And a website.
So our handle is usually at Aviatrix Musical, some variant of that, depending on the social media platform. And the show is running on Vimeo on demand just through Tuesday, right, Ellie?
Tuesday, 8 p.m. EST.
Yeah. We've actually been doing this really cool social media campaign that I think is worth mentioning, that we connected with the aviation community and female pilots of today. And we opened it up, and we just weren't sure what we were going to get back, but we opened it up and said, any female pilots, we want to tell your story, like tell us about you and send us some photos, and we want to amplify you. And we got so much response. It was just so heartening to see. And especially we connected with Megan Davis from Women Rock Wings, who like spends her whole life amplifying female pilots, and she did like an Instagram takeover for us, and our social media is flooded with these amazing women. It's just incredible. It's one of the great benefits of the way we did what we did, is that now we can share this with people all over the world. It was just, you know.
What's also cool is that aviation, particularly these days, is such an international thing, right? So many of the women we speak to do these international flights, and now we can reach them internationally.
But still, female pilots today, it fluctuates between 6 and 7% of all pilots are women, which is, you know, so low. And when you think about Harriet getting her pilot's license in 1910, and she was the first in America, second in the world.
1911.
When I upload it, I'll put all the links to the website and to social media, so people can give a follow. And to purchase tickets, they go through the website?
They can. They can go to our website, and there's like a little button that says get tickets, and it'll take them to Vimeo on Demand, which is like the streaming service that we use.
Yeah.
And from there, they can get tickets that way.
They could also, like, through our link trees on social media. We're also on TodayTix and Gold Star and TDF.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
we're a musical.
We're easy to find, I think.
So thank you very much, and I will speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.